For American Family News, I'm Robert Thornton. President Donald Trump continues to talk about sending troops to large U.S. cities to help fight crime.
I could do that with Chicago. We could do that with New York. We could do it with Los Angeles. So we're making a determination now. Do we go to Chicago or do we go to a place like New Orleans, where we have a great governor, Jeff Landry, who wants us to come in and straighten out a very nice section of this country that's become quite tough.
Some legal experts have said that Trump cannot send in federal troops to cities and cited the Posse Comitatus Act, which limits the use of federal military personnel in domestic law enforcement. Trinidad and Tobago's prime minister has praised a U.S. strike on a boat suspected of carrying drugs in the southern Caribbean and said that all traffickers should be killed violently. President Trump said yesterday that 11 people were killed aboard the boat that had departed Venezuela, which is located near Trinidad and Tobago. The Department of Homeland Security and the Border Patrol have intercepted thousands of pounds of chemicals used to make methamphetamine sent from China to Mexico. Fox's Jessica Rosenthal reports the designation of drug cartels as terrorist organizations makes the seizure a first of its kind.
D.C. U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro announced from Houston the seizure of thousands of pounds of precursor chemicals off 2 ships sent from China on their way to a drug cartel in Mexico.
They would have been used to make 420,000 pounds of methamphetamine.
Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons said now that the president's officially labeled drug cartels terrorist organizations.
This marks the first time a seizure warrant was issued for the material support of terrorism, and that's the Sinaloa cartel.
It took 24 18-wheeler trucks to transport the chemicals out of the port of Houston to a secure facility. Jessica Rosenthal, Fox News.
Yesterday, President Trump said U.S. Space Command will move to Alabama, reversing a Biden-era decision to keep it at its temporary headquarters in Colorado. The new home is in Huntsville, Alabama, also known as Rocket City. Mo Brooks, former U.S. representative from Alabama, stopped by Washington Watch.
Well, I'm elated that finally, once again, we have another presidential decision that recognizes that the Redstone Arsenal, which neighbors Huntsville, Alabama, is the superior location for Space Command. I'm a little bit disappointed that President Trump took 8 months to get this done, and the United States Air Force had determined that Redstone Arsenal here in the Tennessee Valley of Alabama was the superior place to locate Space Command because of all the things that we already do.
He said the area has a lot of technology and experts.
You know, all those gee-whiz bang weapons that you see that the military uses on a regular basis, particularly those that go through the United States Army, they're all purchased through Redstone Arsenal here in the Tennessee Valley, every single one of them, for the use by the United States Army. Plus, we are the ones that have the physicists, the scientists, the engineers that, to a very large degree, either oversee the next technological breakthrough in weaponry or, in fact, actually invent that next breakthrough that gives our warfighters a better capability.
He said the Huntsville area is a less expensive location compared to Colorado. He said there are more engineers per capita in the area than anywhere else in the U.S. A massive wildfire is raging within a historic California gold rush community. According to CAL FIRE, the 6.5 fire in Tuolumne County grew rapidly and remains extremely active. Evacuations include Chinese Camp, which is an abandoned community that was once home to 5,000 Chinese miners. The Houston Chronicle says Buc-ee's travel CEO and founder Arch Beaver Applin III has donated funds for a new building for the Texas A&M campus. Applin is a former student there. The building is expected to be 3 stories and will have almost 212,000 square feet. See more news at afn.net.
If we lose this cultural war, we're going to have a hedonistic, humanistic society.
Discover the story of the culture warrior Don Wildman and how he went head-to-head with Hollywood, Playboy, the homosexual agenda, and the Disney Empire. The movement Don started paved the way for Christians to boldly stand for truth and righteousness in a hostile culture. Watch Culture Warrior today for free. Visit culturewarrior.movie.
Hello, and welcome to the Dr. Nurse Mama Show, prescribing hope for healthy families here on American Family Radio. Here's your host, Professor, Pediatric Nurse Practitioner, and Mom of 4, Dr. Jessica Peck.
Well, hey there, friends, and welcome to my favorite part of the afternoon, getting to spend time with you, prescribing hope for healthy families. And listen, we have got a topic today that is near and dear to my heart. So I hope that you'll hang in there with us, because no matter what age or stage your family is in, conflict is inevitable. But here's the thing. It doesn't have to be destructive. And in today's generation, I see teens who are conflict averse. They avoid conflict. It's really hard to manage conflict, especially in those face-to-face relationships, because so much communication is happening online. And when we're in person with big feelings and underdeveloped brains, underdeveloped prefrontal cortex that help rational thinking, and overdeveloped amygdalas, which make for emotions and fear-based responses, teens today can have it rough. Listen, I am very passionate about talking about teenagers. Not only do I care for them professionally, I am a mom of 4, and at one time I had 4 teenagers at once. It was about the time that I launched my book, and and of course people would introduce this about me. She has 4 teenagers at one time. I would immediately get some uncomfortable laughing, some sighing, some sympathetic head tilting, and some people would just put their hand on my shoulder and start to pray for me out loud. But a lot of other people would speak words that really weren't the kindest, if I'm being so honest. They would say things like, "I'm so glad that I'm not raising teenagers now. I'm so glad that my teens didn't have to grow up in this kind of world. And oh, the teen years were the worst." And I remember thinking very distinctly, you do realize my children can hear you. And so I started to have a shift in my mind at that moment. And I always had an answer ready to tell somebody what I loved about being a mom of teens, what I loved about this parenting stage. And when people, usually that was coming from their own pain, because it can be, teenage years can be a time of trial. It can be really difficult, but it can also be the most fun and the best years of your parenting. Now, if you don't have the right tools, like I did not when I first started out, and that's really what spurred my whole journey. When I first became a teenager, we did not know how to manage conflict. You are going to continue to have anger and misunderstandings, and that spirals into isolation and broken trust. So that's why I'm so excited to talk to you today about a book, A Teen's Guide to Conflict. Now, this is a teen's guide, how to deal with drama, manage anger, and make things right. It is co-authored by best-selling author Dr. Gary Chapman and our guest today, clinical psychologist Dr. Jennifer Thomas. And this book equips teens with practical skills to manage anger, resolve conflict, and restore relationships. And so, Dr. Thomas, Jennifer, we are so glad to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us to talk about this.
Oh, Jessica, I'm glad to be with you.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wrote this book, and why you wrote it for teens, 2 teens. What did God do in your life that brought you to this moment of ministry?
Well, I've been working with Gary Chapman for almost 20 years now. This is the 3rd book that we've co-written. And what we wrote before is the 5 Apology Languages, which is a companion to his bestseller, The 5 Love Languages. And then we've also written a workplace book called Making Things Right at Work. But we said, you know what? It's not just the adults who need to be able to make things right, whether it's at school or in their job sites, but it's also teenagers need help with their school relationships, with their teams that they're participating in, with their part-time jobs, with their families, all sorts of areas where conflict can come up. We know that friendships among teenagers are vital. It helps them to feel connected. It helps to buffer them against the threats to their mental health. And yet they may not have gotten all the skills that they need at their younger age to be prepared. And so we've created a toolbox of skills for managing conflict that we hope will be very practical. And we know that life is a bit like an improv show. And so we've actually used the theme of drama or theater to help move them through the book and help it not to be too dry. So the different sections are actually called acts, and we give them some practical skills that they can read directly or share it with groups that they're in. With a lot of youth leaders are picking up this book to help them be able to just imbue teens with the confidence of knowing, okay, when I run into conflict, which is inevitable, I know how to handle it.
That is a pretty bold statement, and I am thrilled to see the resources behind it. We're definitely fans of Dr. Gary Chapman's work. The 5 Love Languages was instrumental in raising my kids, and apology languages. We've talked a lot about that on this show. Even every week we introduce a new healthy habit for families, and apology was one of those, and recommended that resource for sure. And I think that teens need help in navigating drama today. And, you know, Jennifer, I look back at my generation, I'm Gen X, and the kind of conflict and drama we have was pretty intense. You go back and you watch 80s movies that don't age well at all, and you see how people treat each other and the things that went on in the school cafeteria or behind the school, and parents never knew about it, right? That was kind of the thing. And now I've seen this shift where parents are getting involved. And we actually had a guest last week where we were talking about friendships and how I see, and I even feel a tendency as a mom to get involved in the drama and choose drama over discipleship, you know, being involved and thinking, oh, yes, well, that person sounds terrible. Oh, I can't believe they did that to you. So I'm really grateful to hear you using drama and leveraging it in a positive way. So let's talk about that a little bit more. Let's unpack the drama, because if you don't, teens have always been dramatic. That's just the nature of how God made them. But we see that really increasing. The drama is playing in real time on social media and melodramas. If you look at some of the shows that are really popular, that everybody's watching and getting all involved in the drama of who's she going to pick, all of those things. What do you mean by drama in the book? How do we fall into that trap so easily?
Yeah, well, the first thing you've already touched on, and that's when we're listening to someone's story, we get pulled into the drama just naturally. I can make someone take my side of a story in a heartbeat, but that may not actually be the truth. And so one of the things we talk about is this tendency we have to assume what the motives are of other people. So we too quickly make attributions or misassign or make assumptions about what they're trying to do. And so we encourage people to stop and to realize, okay, if I'm assuming something negative about someone, that might be hurtful to them if they know what I think. And it could also, even if I keep it to myself, it can still affect how I relate to them. And so we encourage people to stop and to remember, okay, I can't really judge someone else's heart. I don't know what they're trying to do. But it's okay to surface some of the conflict and to ask direct questions. For example, saying, I'm not comfortable with this situation. What's going on? Pause, time out. What just happened? So we give the skills to be able to say, stop, I don't like the way this is headed. Let's take it in a different direction. We also think it's important for teens to be reminded of the resources they have. Like if they're helping someone who's in a crisis, or if they're in a crisis themselves, they don't need to handle it alone. And as a clinical psychologist, I think it's vital, so important for us to remind people you've got coaches, you've got youth leaders, you have relatives who love you and care for you. And if they're older and wiser, put them to work, use them. And also we have community-wide resources. For example, there's a national suicide hotline, and the number is 988. And that's something that we want people to keep handy if a friend needs it.
Yeah, absolutely. September is actually National Suicide Awareness Month, and we'll be talking about that more this week. But that number
Excellent.
988 is really important to put in your phones. I put it in my kids' phones. I tell them to share that contact with some help if they need it. It's 24/7 crisis help intervention. And of course, we're always encouraging kids to talk to those caring, trusted adults in their life. But sometimes kids just can't bring themselves to do that. And we want to make sure they have plenty of safety nets in there for sure. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. And, Jennifer,
Exactly.
again,
And
yeah, go
I
ahead.
might mention also, we now have a texting line for getting crisis help with suicidal feelings. And the number to text is 741-741, which is right up the left side of the numeric keypad.
Well, you and I are kindred spirits because that's exactly what I was going to say. That's the contact that I put in
Oh,
the phone. Call 988 or text 741-741. Help when you need it is how I name it as a contact in my phone. It's just crisis
wonderful.
help when you need it, which is so important. And Jennifer, I mean, talking about this drama and getting pulled into drama, I think it is really difficult because kids' lives today are playing out on social media. A lot of times, even if they're not on social media, they're still talked about on social media. And just this real life drama is playing out. And I even heard one young person say to another person this week, your life is not this TV show. Like, that's not what's happening there. And I think drama and conflict go hand in hand. And when we look at past generations, which always fascinates me, kind of how we handle things and generally speaking, in a generation, it can be hard for us to have empathy for a different way that it's handled. And I think about conflict in older generations was very different than what teens see conflict as. And we see the discussion of like even a thumbs up emoji, some teens see as aggressive. Or maybe if I use punctuation in my text message to my child, they're like, what's wrong? Why are you being so aggressive? Is there conflict here? And they start to worry that there's conflict. But conflict is everywhere and conflict is normal. It's going to happen. How does this book help equip teens from a biblical perspective instead of a worldly perspective that's showing them to handle conflict like it's handled on a TV drama?
Yeah, well, what we know is that we want for people to be able to resolve their conflict effectively. And if we as Christians are willing to do the hard work of working through struggles, that may catch the attention of the world. And they may say, something's different about him or her. They're not just ghosting that person. They're trying to get to the bottom of what the problem is and to be able to have one or both sides grow from the conflict. That's ideally what happens, is that we may be stretched when conflict emerges, but ultimately we can grow to a better place. For those who are people pleasers and have trouble saying no, we know that practicing setting boundaries, and maybe it's too hard to say no directly face to face, but the skill can be built to where they can at least say, well, let me think about that. Let me get back to you. When do you need to know by? And sometimes it's easier to say no as a follow-up when the person's not right there directly looking at you. Another skill that we talk about is not having arguments over text, because
Can
you
you say
can't
that
hear the tone
louder
of voice.
again? And
Right.
for me,
Yeah, it's so easy to just slip into trying to get an issue resolved through a text thread. I've got 3 grown kids, and I now have a lovely daughter-in-law as well. And our youngest is still a teenager. And I find that with my kids, if they're texting me about something and if I have to say no to them, it may go south and they may start to argue with me. But it's that moment of being willing to say to the other person, you know what? I don't like the way this is going. I think we should talk about this face to face. I'll see you at, and then just fill in the blank of when you're going to be able to talk to them or see them. I would stop action with my kids just so that they could see how that was done and so that I wouldn't end up arguing with them by text sometimes. And I might even say, if you need to get this resolved today, Maybe they were, I remember a time my daughter was shopping at the shopping center. And
You know what? I'm going to hold you right there. Jennifer, I'm going to hold you right there because I want to hear about this story. I have a story about my daughter too. We'll talk about it after the break. Listen, we are talking about a teen's guide to conflict, how to deal with drama, manage anger, and make things right. We're talking with Jennifer Thomas. We'll be right back with more help and hope on the other side of this break. Don't go away.
I know God's given me a lot, and I really appreciate everything He's given me, but if there was one thing in the entire world that I would want, it's a husband. And He just seems to be withholding that from me.
This is Seeking Him with Nancy DeMoss Wogelmuth.
The Apostle Paul talks to singles in 1 Corinthians 7 and says, each has his own gift from God. In other words, marriage is a gift that can be used for God's glory, and so is singleness. You see, happiness isn't found in or out of marriage. In fact, it's not found in any human relationship. True joy can only be found in Christ. God has promised to give us everything we need. If He knows a husband would make it possible for you to bring Him greater glory, then He'll provide a husband. True contentment comes when we choose to be satisfied with what God has provided. With Seeking Him, I'm Nancy DeMoss Wogelmuth.
Do you believe in the absolute inerrancy of God's holy word? Do you believe in the power of the Holy Spirit to radically change lives and empower us to live like Christ? At Wesley Biblical Seminary, we believe God is raising up a movement of people across our nation and across the world who hold fast to the authority of the Bible and the hope of holiness. We are working today to equip tomorrow's pastors and Christian leaders through biblical and theological education and practical ministry that's accredited, affordable, online, and highly personal. Our programs include undergraduate, master's, and doctoral degrees, certificate programs, and even training for lay people. So whatever your next step is in being equipped for ministry, we're here for you. And if you believe these are the kinds of pastors we need leading our churches in the future, we invite you to learn more about partnering with us through giving. Learn more about Wesley Biblical Seminary by visiting us at wbs.edu today.
AFA Stream. It sounds like it could be a great place to catch fish or paddle a canoe. And as good as that is, AFA Stream is even better. It's a resource for life-changing instruction and information with videos like The Biblical Case for Cultural Engagement and God in the Constitution. It's also a source of wholesome entertainment and relaxation with family-friendly features like Ryan DeFrady's Secret Agent and The Pilgrim's Progress, plus access to some of your favorite AFA shows so you can catch up on what you missed or enjoy a favorite episode for a second or 10th time. You can watch a lot of content for free, or you can become a Great Commission partner. Then you'll not only open the door to everything AFA Stream has to offer, you'll get benefits like a subscription to The Stand and some really nice exclusives. Why not get started today? It's easy. Visit stream.afa.net when it's convenient. stream.afa.net.
For my waking breath, for my daily bread, I depend on you. I depend on you for the sun to rise, for my sleep at night. I depend on you. Yes, I depend on you. You're the way, the truth, and the light. You're the well that never runs dry. I'm the branch and you are the vine. Draw me close and teach me to abide.
Welcome back, friends. That is Abide by Aaron Williams and Dwell Songs. And that is the message that we're giving to you. It's just abiding in Christ. Sometimes it feels like we are surrounded by conflict. You may be in a season of conflict. And many times, Excuse me. I am getting over. You'll have to put up with it. I'm getting over a little cold that my kids have had on back to school. And so thank you for sticking with me as my voice is not too sturdy today. But the other thing that is not too sturdy and that has been not too sturdy in my life in the past is conflict between me and my kids, conflict between my kids and their friends, conflict between my kids and the world. And a lot of times that conflict involves anger. Anger is a really powerful emotion, and for many teens, it feels like it's just the driver's seat. It's almost uncontrollable. But what if anger could be harnessed for good rather than for harm? We're talking about a new book called A Teen's Guide to Conflict by someone who is very familiar to you, Dr. Gary Chapman and Dr. Jennifer Thomas. And she's here with us today to talk about how teens, we can help them recognize the difference between healthy conflict and destructive conflict, and how we can repair relationships with meaningful apologies. And Jennifer, right before the break, you were just about to tell a story about your own daughter. And so I definitely want to go back to that because I know you have so many impressive credentials as a professional. You're so accomplished, but so many of these life lessons, I feel like, really come from the heart of our own family. And yes, those professional things are helpful, but it's our own experience with our families and what God teaches us to strengthen our faith, I think, that are the most meaningful. So take it away. Tell us your story.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. The things that happen in our own families are really memorable to us. And so I'm happy to share what I can from our experiences. I remember that when my daughter was independent enough to go off shopping with friends, that she would sometimes be texting with me about things that she wanted to buy. But if I wrote back, no, or I think you've got too many of those already, or something like that, she would push back. And at that moment, anything that I wrote, she might have heard it sounding angry or a raised tone of voice, even though it was just texting. And I also really feel that if we're going to teach kids not to argue by text, we're going to have to show them how to stop, pause, and make the communication happen in a different format. And so I would try to make it a point to say, pause, no, this isn't working. If it's really important to you to buy that thing, you're going to need to call me by a telephone audio call or a FaceTime video call. And that was just a boundary that I set. And it often, was practical and helpful too, because I could see her face. If she would give me a video call, I could see what she was looking at. And it also helped us often to just be able to resolve the conflict without having hurt feelings when she came home.
I really appreciate you sharing that. And I think there's no mom of any teenager today that can't relate to that kind of scenario because it happens. Like I said, I mean, you might say no, but if you put a period after that no, then somehow it comes across as aggressive or angry, or why are you angry? And so much is lost because the honest truth is we don't speak the same language as our kids often when we text. They may use an emoji with a completely different meaning than we do. I mean, I remember one of my kids texting me like a skull emoji. And honestly, Jennifer, I was so perplexed. I thought, what in the world does this mean? Because it was something that was funny.
Yeah,
and they're like,
us.
yes, that means I'm dying laughing. It means like I'm dead. It was so funny. And I thought, oh, it was funny. I thought that meant like, oh, that was terrible. That joke is dead. Or I didn't know what it meant because I don't speak teen emoji. So I think having those conversations where we are speaking the same language is so important. And I said I would share a story about my daughter, my oldest. I was really not very well prepared to be a mom. I didn't have a healthy relationship with my mom as an example. And so I brought a lot of insecurity into my early mothering journey, Jennifer. I did. And my oldest daughter, as she reached those teen years, we were in constant conflict. But what I discovered, the root of that conflict was my insecurity, that I was somehow doing things wrong, that I was hurting her, and I was putting so much pressure on her to give me an immediate feedback loop, immediate gratification that I was doing okay as a mom. And the truth was, she was giving me that, and she was telling me, you're not doing a great job. And we found ourselves in conflict one day driving down the road. I've shared this story before, but I was driving, she was in the back seat. And it was so bad, she threw a book at my head while I was driving. And, I pulled over and I started to pray, and I knew that I was going to need a new mindset and, more importantly, a new skill set. It wasn't just going to magically happen. I wasn't just going to be able to pray my way through it, although I had to pray my way through it. I needed practical skills. And that's why I'm so grateful for this resource that you've written, A Teen's Guide to Conflict, How to Deal with the Drama, Manage Anger, and Make Things Right, because we need to be intentional in that. Now, you described healthy disagreement between mother and daughter. I described destructive conflict between mother and daughter. How do we tell the difference? Where's the line at in welcoming healthy disagreement and recognizing that point at which it starts to become destructive?
Yeah, well, we say there are three things that drive natural differences that we might have with other people. So normal conflict, no big problem, totally understandable that it would pop up. And those three things are when we have different perspectives, different opinions, and different preferences. And it's actually healthy for us to be able to express those. Some people who avoid conflict, they won't even tell you what they want. They might just say things like, well, it's fine. Whatever you want is fine with me. Or any restaurant, any place you want to go, it's fine. But then you don't really know whether you should accept that and go where you want to go, or if they're going to be frustrated later on. And so I think of the scripture that talks about, like, simply let your yes be yes and your no be no. If we're clear with people, then when they say, or when one of us says, yes, it's fine with me, then we can better trust that they're being honest with us and that they don't have a strong opinion about that. But it's these natural and understandable differences that are actually healthy conflicts for us to get into, or differences of opinion would be a more gentle way to say it. But sometimes we get into unhealthy conflicts, ones that are more toxic. And that usually involves someone being controlling, possibly not respecting our boundaries, or maybe they haven't made their boundaries clear, but they might get defensive and even say, like, you've taken too much or you've asked too much, when really, the difference of agreement would come down to, well, did you tell me? When I asked you, you said it didn't really matter to you. So there's a real challenge in trying to have open communication. And I'm certainly, professionally, I'm an expert, but my relationships are not perfect. Just the other day, I texted a friend that my son had vomited shortly after he moved into college. He got a stomach bug, and that I wasn't sure what
That's the
to
worst.
do, because he was in a parking lot throwing up, and I was with him, and I didn't know whether to. Part of my instinct was to go rub his back, but part was to just walk away and give him some privacy until he was done. And as I texted that to her, this friend, she was in a different place, didn't really understand. I had also said something about they were down from 8 kids to 2 in their suite. I meant because of the Labor Day weekend. These kids really clear out. My son's new at this college. I didn't know the habit. Well, guess what? Miscommunication. She thought I was saying that all those kids were sick and my son was trying to stay well. And then I was asking, what should we do? So it was on multiple levels. We completely missed it with each other. And she wrote back something about, I hope your son's immune system is healthy. And at that point, I didn't even know that she was on a completely different page. I just took it as, well, I hope he'll recover quickly. So we had kind of a laugh when we unpacked it and realized, luckily we're low conflict, but how likely it is, once your tension is high and the stress is high, that kind of miscommunication could really go south. And so when that happens, I want to introduce to your listeners this concept of apology languages. That's what we need to do next, is to be quick to apologize and to try to make things right.
Easier said than done, but that scenario is so relatable. Jennifer, I've had 3 kids in college and I've had very similar communication, because it's like, oh, are you saying my kid got everybody sick? Or are you saying that, my kid's going to get your kid sick? Or are you saying my kid has to be out of the dorm? And what follows that a lot of times, and I'm so glad to hear that your conflict was resolved in a healthy way. But so often what follows that is anger. Conflict, it just seems like anger just comes as a rush. Like I can even picture anger in that situation. Like, how could she say that? And any conflict that you're having with your kid or between your kids or between your friends, really anger is something that is a human reaction. It is natural. And we know that kids especially are ill-equipped to deal with anger because their prefrontal cortex that helps them make logical decisions is not fully developed. How do you address anger in this book? What kind of tools do you have to deal with that? Because that's a lot of times just like pouring gasoline on a fire, and that's what will turn a healthy disagreement into a destructive conflict in a hurry.
True. And Jessica, that's why I'm really glad that you raised that question. I think a lot of us fear anger, just like we fear conflict. But the first thing we want to do is to acknowledge that both conflict and anger can be healthy. And anger is actually a God-given gift. It has to do with our sense of justice and our sense of right and wrong. And so anger is okay. One thing we say is it's never wrong to be angry about what angers God. But it's how our actions flow out of that anger that can get us into trouble and can, in fact, make us need to apologize. What we know is when there's anger, when someone gets offended, it creates a barrier between us and the other person. I picture a construction, like a road barrier. And when those offenses keep coming, it's like the barriers can go taller, more and more tall. And apologies do is they come in and they remove the barrier and they open the doorway to forgiveness and to trust. But there's no guarantee that the person's going to forgive you. And so we want to be quick to point out that in order for our relationships to be preserved, we're going to have to learn how to use our anger carefully and to not make false accusations to other people, to not assume that we know what they're trying to do, but to just be willing to ask open-ended questions. And when they respond, we recommend doing reflective listening, where you say back what you think you've heard them say in order to make sure that you're not miscommunicating.
You know, when you feel angry in those kinds of situations, it becomes really difficult to control your words and to control your speech. And I know as a mom, when I've been angry, that is the time I am most prone to say things that I really regret. And I know that my kids say things in anger, and I've had to learn how not to take those personally, not to, because sometimes my kids, they can say something in anger and they know me, they know my insecurities, they know what will hurt me. And sometimes just out of their immaturity, out of their foolishness, kids will say things that can hurt you in that way. And I've had to learn to really model what I want to see, because sometimes I say things and I think, okay, well, my prefrontal cortex is fully developed and here I am saying this. And you know what I find, Jennifer, is when people are angry, they start to use shaming language that generalizes a behavioral trait into a character struggle. So say you're arguing about, somebody wasn't on time and you're having to wait a long time to pick them up, or you're arguing because they didn't communicate well and you have a miscommunication now that has affected your plans or anything like that. And you start to say, why do you always do this? Why do you have to be so lazy, so mean, so hurtful, so hateful? Why do you always have to ruin these situations? And I get chills even in thinking about it, because that's where you're, again, moving from that healthy disagreement where you're saying, okay, we're having a problem because you're struggling with being on time. You're struggling with communicating clearly. This is a problem we need to work on together, to you are this person. And when we come back, we're up against our next break already, but when we come back, I want to talk about why it's so important for teens to learn to make things right when they've hurt someone or when they've been hurt themselves, and how we can model that. And especially, like we've already talked about several times, the apology languages are so important. I think that's one of the most important tools that we can have in our toolkit is healthy, effective apologies. So listen, if you're listening out there and you're feeling like, oh, she's speaking to me, Conflict does not have to destroy your relationships. It can actually strengthen them if you have the right tools. It can be a doorway to building stronger, healthier relationships. And when we come back, we'll talk about why some apologies fall flat and how we can turn that anger into growth. Again, the book is A Teen's Guide to Conflict: How to Deal with Drama, Manage Anger, and Make Things Right. I encourage you to co-learn with your teens. We'll be right back with more from Dr. Jennifer Thomas.
God is at work and He's calling His people to rise in truth. Truth Rising is a powerful new documentary from Focus on the Family and the Colson Center. See how ordinary Christians choose courage in a culture that needs truth. Watch Truth Rising starting September 5th and find out how you can be a part of the change and become an agent of restoration. Sign up at truthrising.com. That's truthrising.com.
At Wesley Biblical Seminary, we believe God is raising up a movement across our nation and around the world who hold fast to the inerrancy of Scripture and the hope of holiness. We do this through bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degrees, certificate programs, and even training for lay people. So whatever your next step is in being equipped for ministry, we're here for you. And if you believe these are the kind of pastors we need leading churches in the future, we invite you to think about giving to Wesley Biblical Seminary. Learn more about us at wbs.edu.
Have you ever wanted to take a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee? Raise your hand. Yeah, but in order to do that, you have to actually go to the Sea of Galilee. Hello, this is Tim Wildman, president of American Family Association and American Family Radio. We are going to Israel and to the Sea of Galilee, the Jordan River, where we'll have a baptismal service. We're going to the Dead Sea. We're going to Jerusalem and Bethlehem and Nazareth. A lot of the places you've read about in the Bible your whole life, we're going to be seeing on our annual trip of Israel, the Holy Land. If you want more information on our tour, go to wildmangroup.com, WILDMON group.com. We also have information there about the Footsteps of Paul Greece tour that's back-to-back with the Israel tour, so it's also in March of 2026. We look forward to seeing you on one of our tours.
The following is not an actor, but a real-life story from Trinity Debt Management.
I'm Claire from Trinity Debt Management. I'm a counselor, and the reason that I love working for Trinity is because I get to help folks with one of the hardest problems a family can face, and that's financial difficulties. In this day and age, everything is going up. You have higher utilities, higher grocery bills, higher fuel, and those credit card interest rates have gone up as well. We can help you with that. We can help you get lower interest rates, lower monthly payments. In just a few minutes, we put together a plan that gets you out of debt and keeps you out of debt. I love my job. It's a great program and a very smart way to find debt relief.
If credit card debt has you down, call Trinity at 1-800-788-1813.
I'm Claire, a Trinity counselor. Call me and become debt-free for keeps.
1-800-788-1813.
Ain't no doubt about you. Everywhere that I go, you keep showing up. Lord, you make me wanna shout it. Oh, you're the goodness in my life. And I'ma tell you my truth. They may come, they may go. You keep showing up, so do. Ain't no doubt about it. You are the goodness in my life.
Welcome back, friends. That is The Goodness by Toby Mac and Blessing Offer. And we are talking about goodness today, and we're looking for goodness among our listeners. Has the Lord used American Family Radio in your life? Have we been there at just the right time, with just the right thought, at just the right place? We would love for you to share your story as we prepare for Fall Share-a-thon. All you have to do is just call our listener storyline. That number is 877-876-8893. That's 877-876-8893. Just share for a minute, maybe 2 minutes, and you might hear yourself on the radio during Share-a-thon. We would love to hear your story. And today we're talking about the story of kids facing drama, teens facing drama today, and how do we teach kids healthy conflict resolution? Listen, the world around us is teaching them actively through media, through social media reels and influencer and popular teen dramas about how to manage conflict resolution. But parents and other caring, invested adults, we have a great opportunity to disciple our kids and to help them deal with drama. So if you're a parent, a grandparent, a teacher, a mentor of teenagers, you know emotions can run high. You know that relationships can be complicated. But teens are wrestling with really big questions right now, like, why am I so angry with myself? And why don't they want to be friends with me? And when should I set boundaries? Or when should I make things right? When should I speak up? When should I be quiet? Dr. Jennifer Thomas is joining us today. She is co-author of A Teen's Guide to Conflict: How to Deal with Drama, Manage Anger, and Make Things Right. And she's talking about some clear, relatable advice. And how do we understand anger? How do we lean into the 5 apology languages? How do we practice healthy communication and turn conflict into connection? So Jennifer, before the break, we were talking just about anger and how it can be so destructive. And I was sharing how, my struggle, I think a very human struggle, is to move into those words that we regret and deeply wound other people. How do you see that? And where's the path to apology and restoration?
Yeah, well, when we get into an argument with someone else, it can feel like they move into character assassination. We might try to keep it on a level playing field, not commit what I call fouls, but they may get flooded, get more angry, and we can see that coming out in their language. For example, you may hear extreme words from people like always and never. You always do this, you never let me do that. Everyone gets to do it, but I never get to. You give me zero trust. All of those extreme words are a sign that things are about to go off the rails. And so for a listener of any age, I would say that's a time that you might say, you know what, could we reschedule this? And if you think about it, those times are likely to come when people are hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. So check your watch. If it's after bedtime, that doubles my advice for you to say, let's table this until tomorrow. But if you do ask people to wait, then you've got a responsibility to bring it back up the next day. Don't just be trying to push off the conflict because it makes you uncomfortable, but actually set a reminder. And then when you have your own time, you can go, you could pray, you could get counsel from other people, you could read our book, but then do be sure to go back to them at a time that maybe you've suggested or a time that's not too far away and say, you know what, let's continue to unpack what we were talking about because I want to make sure that I understand what you were trying to say. It's also a nice time to add something about your commitment to the person or what you really like about them. So you could say, our friendship is important to me and I don't want to see us kind of just quietly drawing back out of hurt. And so I want to really hear and make sure I fully understand what you're trying to say. And if they go on to explain to you that they have been hurt or offended by what you've done, then it's time to see if you're ready and willing to offer an apology. And if you realize, they have a point, I do wish I hadn't said or done that the way I did, I would like to apologize. What we have found is that sometimes people were offering apologies, but they weren't hitting the mark for the people. They were missing it with each other because what Gary Chapman and I found is that people have 5 different things that they're waiting to hear in an apology. And you can use all 5 phrases. Those are 5 good steps to a complete apology. And in fact, if you don't know their primary apology language, then it is best to use all 5 in your apologies just to make sure that you say something that's going to be music to their ears. But assuming that I know what their primary apology language is, I might go to them and use that first. Just right up front, you could say, I want to apologize to you. I, and then use one of the five. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I want to make amends. I want to let you know it's going to be different next time. And you can end it with something about requesting forgiveness. Now, we can't demand that. We don't want to push people to forgive us right away, but you could say something like, I hope that over time I'll be able to rebuild your trust. And here are some steps that I want to take in order to do that.
I think that's so instructive. And I want to address two things in what you said. The first is that looking at your own triggers, looking at your own capacity. And often with teenagers, it seems like drama comes late at night, whether that's something you discover, a grade, the homework that's not done, you walk into their room to say goodnight, and it's a disaster, and it sparks your anger, it sparks conflict. There are lots of easy ways to fall into traps at night. And I hear people misuse a scripture a lot, saying, don't let the sun go down on your anger. And I think it's important to look at that and says, yes, it's important for it not to go down in your anger. It doesn't say, don't let the sun go down on unresolved conflict, because sometimes conflicts are just too big to be solved in that night. But you can diminish your anger and say, I love you. And I know that we have to have a conversation to work through this, but I love you enough. We're going to be okay if we wait to talk about this tomorrow. It's going to be all right. We'll talk about it. We'll talk through it at this time, at this place, wherever that's going to be. I think that's really important to do. So just looking if you're living in a season of conflict and you feel like you're in a rut, I think that's a great thing to look at. Where is the conflict happening? When is the conflict happening? What is your emotional state when it's happening? And the second thing is this apology language. Now, you can go to, I'm talking to our listeners, you can go to 5lovelanguages.com. That's the number 5lovelanguages.com. And you can click on their quiz tab, and there's actually an apology language quiz. So Jennifer, I took this quiz and I was really surprised because I have a strong preference for apology and the way that they are delivered. And I thought this could be a really instructive skill set that people can have. We may have the sincerity down, but saying things in a way that it makes other people be able to lower those barriers, and what you were talking about, I think, is really important. So is there anything else you'd like to add about the importance of a good apology? I think this is such a great way to model conflict resolution for our kids.
Right. Well, Jessica, I'm so glad that you took our free profile. We've left it for free on the website so that the most people as possible can take it. And we encourage people to take it and to share the results with the people who they see every day. That might be people at work, people at home, and people at school as well. So that when inevitably, if there is conflict and an apology is needed, you'll know what you want to make sure to not leave out in order to show how sincere you are in your apology.
Well, what advice do you have? Let's move to a different topic before I lose all of my time with you, because I have so many questions I could ask you. When the conflict is not between you and your teen, when the conflict is between your teen and someone else, or teens between each other, or just another person in their lives, when do you step in? And when do you not step in? Because we read about all of these parenting styles that have become popular, like helicopter parenting, hovering over every conflict, over every situation, or lawnmower, just mowing every obstacle down, making sure our kids don't have to face conflict, or just a bulldozer, making sure, lawnmower is making sure everything's all manicured and beautiful, and bulldozer is knocking down any obstacle they have. Where is the boundary for stepping in and letting them figure it out themselves?
Yeah. Well, I do family coaching as well as executive coaching, and I get this question a lot. If two people are squabbling, when should I get involved, and when should I just remain a sounding board for the person who told me about the problem? And what we say is it really comes back to the seriousness of the problem, also the age of the person who's struggling. So if it is a teenager, then I think we as the adults in the situation would be more apt to consider stepping in and maybe even asking that question. Do you feel like you need some backup here? What would that look like? Would you like for me to come and be part of a meeting or help you draft what you want to say to them. And I encourage them, maybe if you're sort of a behind the scenes coach about how they're going to respond, they could take some notes, and then have them go and talk to that person directly if they're able to. Now, if there's a large age gap between the teenager and who they're trying to resolve conflict with, then I'm more likely to get involved because of the power imbalance. Also, if it's a coach or a teacher or someone who has a lot of power over the teenager, then I think we should possibly err on the side of getting involved, as long as that's not going to violate any kind of confidentiality with the kids. But we also need to teach our teenagers that there are limits to confidentiality. Like, you can't promise a friend to keep their secret if their secret is that they're suicidal. And the same thing for us as adults. I can't promise to keep your secret if there's abuse that is happening. And so you can just let them know that you'll be there to help figure out and to navigate who they need to get in touch with and what they need to do in order to make sure that everyone is going to be safe.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because that's something that we established in my own house as a rule with my kids, that there are no secrets. We have some things that are confidential that not everybody needs to hear. And so I'd be really careful about our language with that and saying, this is confidential. I'm handling it with so-and-so, with whichever family member was involved. But I remember there is a lot of pressure, even in church groups that are well-intentioned, to say what happens in life group or what happens in small group, what happens in Sunday school in our group here, what happens at church stays at church. But there are limits to that. And parents need to know, and they need to know early so that they can manage conflict that's happening or conflict that may emerge from risk-taking behaviors. And so I think that's really, really important. And so my kids would just be very upfront, and people would say, can you keep a secret? They would just flat out say, no, I cannot. I do not keep secrets from my mom. So don't tell me anything you don't want me to tell my mom, because I have to tell her everything. And I just let them use me for that out in that way. Mm-hmm. But underpinning all of this, Jennifer, is faith. Everything is about having a relationship with Jesus Christ. And I feel like if we're working to walk with him daily, if we're working to disciple our kids, a lot of times these things, these skills, they just come a little bit easier. I think that that's just God's grace and all of that. What is the underpinning of faith throughout this resource that you've created?
We've designed this book with youth groups in mind. We have a secular imprint and a Christian imprint at Moody Publishing. And for this one, we chose the Christian imprint because we felt that the Bible verses were key to people being able to use the tools and to speak to conflict and how to resolve conflict from a biblical perspective. So we've been very upfront about who this is designed for, and everyone's welcome to read the book. But I think that especially people who come from a Christian perspective are going to find that they're very comfortable with the advice about how to handle conflict, but also about how to resolve it and issues of forgiveness. And we also bring in the Christian perspective there, like, when does God forgive us? When should we forgive others? And Gary Chapman is a pastor, and so we've delved into the original Greek and Hebrew, and we've come up with some interesting things that we wanted to underscore, following in the work of Dietrich Bonhoeffer, who a long time ago said there's cheap grace out there, and that's when we forgive people, and yet we're not pulling for them to repent. And so that's something that we've brought back up in our book, and we've talked about
those.
1 John.
Those are convicting words. And I have to tell you, Jennifer, that's the second time Dietrich Bonhoeffer has come up in a week, which has been great, because such words of wisdom and so much more wisdom of words from the Bible. If you want to help your teens identify the difference between healthy and harmful anger, and to respond and not react in tough situations, and to navigate the drama, get them a Teen's Guide to Conflict. And as you do, I pray the Lord will bless you and keep you and make his face to shine upon you. I'll see you right back here tomorrow.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast